Session for Guam Waterworks Authority. For the record, those present are myself, Commissioner Chaco, Commissioner Sanchez, Commissioner Santos, and Commissioner Martinez. And Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You'll know we have 6 items on the agenda. The first item we were hoping to bring before the board. However, there are still some contract issues that we're not certain are going to be worked out. So at this point, we're just going to table this one until we finalize those contract issues. If we can get it done by the meeting, then we'll present it at the meeting. If not, then we will save it for next month.
Okay.
So moving to resolution number 11-FY 2023. This is relative to construction management contract approval for the Tamuning and Menangan Reservoir project. As you know, that these are 2 remaining reservoirs that need to be addressed to fulfill the court order requirements. So it is a court order project. We have a 3 million gallon tank to be constructed at the adjacent to the existing airport reservoir in Tamuning, and then another 2 million gallon tank adjacent to the existing Menangan reservoir up in Georgia. Included in that will be, in addition to the reservoirs, pipelines, vaults, valves, SCADA, instrumentation, and other general site upgrades. The cost for the construction management services, the proposal was negotiated, and we are at 1.84 million. We're seeking that amount with a 10% contingency for a total authorized funding amount of 2.025 million. We anticipate 16 months of construction management services at this point. The start date is dependent on the first resolution, which we're tabling, the construction contract award. So we're waiting on that, but we're hopefully going to get this contract signed in April. Funding source is anticipated to be DW0911, water system reservoir improvements. So this is bond funding. There were 12 firms that registered for the RFP for construction management services. 5 firms submitted the proposals, and on the basis of qualifications, Duenas Camacho and Associates was recommended for award.
Any questions?
No, straightforward.
Okay. Next.
Next, Mr. Chair, is Resolution 12-FY 2023, and this is, again, another construction management contract, this time for the existing construction contract that we have ongoing at Santa Rosa, Sanifa, and Santa Rita for the tank and system upgrades. If the commissioners recall, we've had problems with the Santa Rita site because of the geologic conditions there and the soil saturation, which caused a slide or slippage at the site, including slippage that affects an access road to adjacent properties. So in trying to reconfigure or address those site challenges, there's been some additional redesign work that has been done, changes to the routing of the pipeline and roadway, and then also beefing up of the foundation for the tank. At this point, we're still working on the foundation for the tank, and there has been 77 precast piles that have been driven in place. Some have not reached bedrock, and some have reached bedrock at a level where there's excess length on the pile. So there's a little bit of rework that needs to be done, and we're trying to work out the details of that with the engineer of record. But we do anticipate that there will be additional work extending the contract time for Santa Rita. We're looking at that closely to see at what point this becomes too problematic, and I don't know. We're not going to have a decision on that for a few weeks. We're looking at some additional information from the engineer of record and also the CM. So we've asked for some additional analysis, so I might be back to you on this. The Santa Rosa and the Sanifa projects are pretty much complete. The tanks are online. However, there is some additional work that needs to be done for site, the control building at Sanifa, paving and general site upgrades, and then for Santa Rosa, we're still working on the booster pump station and paving. So this work is extended to go out till July for Santa Rosa and May for Sanifa, so we do need additional CM time on that. We did negotiate with the contractor to cut since we're now at the tail end of it, to cut some of the effort down. And so we shaved several $100,000 off of their initial proposal. So for the extension, and right now we're looking at a not to exceed amount. We're still finalizing those amounts, but we're looking at a not to exceed amount of $955,000 to extend CM work on all 3 sites. And that will bring the total authorized funding for CM at all 3 sites to about $6.6 million. This is anticipated with this extended schedule for Santa Rita to go out to January of 2024. Again, this is all dependent on what we do with Santa Rita. And this is also bond funded out of PW 0911 Water System Reservoir Improvement.
Where's the Santa Rita?
It's behind the school on the hillside.
I mean, JP Torres. JP Torres?
He knows the school.
Yes, definitely.
So just for information, that slippage we were talking about, there's been since, so before, the tank was offline for a long time before we started this construction project. It was because a record rainfall event caused slippage, took out the pipe, and then the
Yes,
pipe
the
leaked.
roadway,
Remember
the
the
pipe.
road eroded. So
Yeah.
we got that, we spent money to get that fixed. But the tank remained offline. And during the construction process, there was another record rainfall event in October, about a year ago. And that caused slippage on soils on the site, as well as affecting the adjacent access road to those properties. So it was only 1 or 2 feet in displacement initially. Since then, with the rain, especially that we got in January, as I understand it, the total displacement is now 7 feet. And some of the monitoring tubes that were put in place to check where determine exactly where the slip plane was in the soil, that sheared off. So we now know exactly where the slip plane is. What we're wrangling about now is, what is the solution, permanent solution to repair it going to be, and is it worth that if we don't know, if it creates uncertainty for whether the tank will be further compromised by similar weather events in the future. So it's a really difficult decision, and we don't want to make it lightly. We're, analyzing as much of it as we can, and I'll come back to you with an update on that situation. But that's kind of the situation we're facing in Santa Rita. No, just the foundation. The piling has been partially constructed. We're almost done with that. But before we go through and finish it, we want to make certain that we're,
Safe.
Keep it.
yeah.
You want to use gravity, obviously, to let the go down. Because
So
not to tell me where it's at, I kind of have an idea.
So the solution, the geotech solution, I think what they're discussing is, in order to keep anything from moving any further, drive sheet piles in, at a level above where that slip plane is, and then repair it. But drive the sheet piles down to bedrock. The problem is, if you do that, all the water that goes through the soil and comes down the hill along the bedrock plane, does it just go around the sheet piling? Does it create a dam? We're still not certain that has been fully thought through, and so we don't want to pull the trigger on anything until we get a good handle on that.
And there's actually money left in that first bond. That was I saw when I saw the funding
Well,
source.
that's the bond line item number. The bond funding may be, I think it's 2016 bond funds that are in there.
Oh, okay.
But the line item number,
We started this thinking about this in 05. We're
yeah,
now
the
finishing-
reservoir project started in
Got it,
05,
got it.
part of the stipulated.
Still good.
Gail, worst case scenario is part of
Yeah, so we're evaluating
another site.
alternative sites.
Wow.
That requires some hydraulic modeling, so we're looking at it from as many angles as we can identify it.
Just the next closest one, right? Just one on the United Road.
Well, the tank has been offline for a year or more, right? And then we're surviving with storage from other sites. So we have the water that's being fed is coming across Cross Island Road from the Sanifa Reservoir. Santa Rita Springs is another source, and then water we purchased from the Navy. So all three sources are going into this area, but the storage capacity we have in between this tank is Sanifa on the uphill side, which is near the old racetrack and, you know, that area. And then further down the Santa Ana lower, which is on the way up to the Matic.
What do our friends at Navy give us?
Yeah, they're providing water, but no storage capacity, right? So we have an old tank somewhere in Santa Rita Village, an old tank site near Agura subdivision that we're evaluating to see if we could use that site. The other alternative is increase the capacity at Sanifa by putting another reservoir or rehabilitating the existing reservoir that's there and using that as storage. But in order to know if that's going to work, we still have to go through the hydraulic modeling.
Okay. Next one.
Next resolution is 13 FY 2023, and this is for the additional construction funding for the Gwa Ws sewer pump station flood mitigation and facility rehab project. This has been ongoing for the Gwa wastewater pump station. It sits in a low-lying area, obviously, but it gets frequently flooded. In the past, our operators have had to utilize a boat to row out to the pump station to get in, to get access. So we are upgrading the pump station itself to address the flooding, raising the control, motor control center and other issues. But for this, we've decided that there needs to be some additional changes for the motor control center, the hoist, and the platform. Just because of the space that's required for the motor control center and then the hoist, we wanted to extend its useful life and upsize it for safety. And then the platform, we're changing the platform materials from metal to fiberglass for durability and for safety concerns. So the additional funding that is required to make these changes is $184,000 roughly. And so we're seeking that amount with the original contract value that would bring the total authorized funding to $1.1 million. We anticipate completion by the end of July this year. And this is from Master Plan Wastewater Pump 01 lift station upgrades from the SPON funded. Any questions on that?
Okay.
I'll let the CFO introduce this next resolution.
Good morning. Resolution 14/2023 is relative to authorizing management to invest funds. Our unrestricted, we're mainly looking at our unrestricted account. We recently received $2 million for the sewer loan revolving program, as well as the ARPA money designated for some infrastructure projects that we won't be needing to use immediately. So we're asking authorization to move those funds into investment vehicles that earn, at least as of last week, upwards of 4%. Our accounts are all currently located with the Bank of Guam, and the hope is to work with the bank to invest those funds in investment vehicles that are safe, but, you know, earn a return that is, you know, more than the current savings accounts are. So we're looking at the sewer loan, revolving loan program, the non-bond CIP projects, which is basically the ARPA. The STC funds are currently in the invested, but we just wanted to make sure that we had this covered in case the bank came back in for authorization, and as well as any other unrestricted funds that we might not need immediately. For instance, we have customer deposits that are pretty much a stable amount that we don't need to use immediately. With regard to the resolution, I just want to point out that I need to make a correction to, I think it's on page 118 of the board books, line 20. So I need to change that are currently in accounts that earn minimal interest. So, I just clarified that with the staff the other day, and as I said, the interest that we're earning, with our unrestricted accounts are generally below 1%. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Chapo.
The timeline for the TCDs, what are we looking at? Are we looking at just like a 12-month type, like a short type, or?
Right, so what, the hope was to ladder the investment so that, maybe in 3-month increments, so that we have some liquidity in case we have vendor payments we need to make. So, and then as those investments mature, work with staff to determine when we might need those amounts and determine whether or not we can roll them over, or if we need to keep them more liquid.
And then the total amount of the unrestricted funds and the revolving funds, what's the total amount that you're looking to?
So the revolving fund is about $2 million. The SDC funds is 6.6, but we already have 3.7 in TCDs. The ARPA money is about 8.6 million, and and then the unrestricted amounts, we're still kind of determining how much of that we can place in, we can tie up, yeah.
The unrestricted funds are the customer deposits you're referring?
Customer deposit, yeah. If you look on, there is a list of our cash accounts in the board books. It's Schedule G.
Financial?
Yeah, in the financials. So right now we're showing total unrestricted funds of 53.6 million. But some of that is related to when we get an allotment from the bank every month to help us to pay for our O&M. So we would want to make sure that we have those amounts, liquid in our checking account, and then any amounts like the customer deposits we would likely push into or similar investment vehicles.
Any further questions?
Yeah, the 4%, is that for 12 months?
So we were looking at jumbos, jumbo TCDs, and at the time, the list that I saw from the bank were showing over 4%, and they were generally 1 year.
Commissioner
Are we
Santos.
allowed to go outside the bank wall, or we have to stay there?
No, I think if we decided to go outside the bank account, we would likely need to do procurement.
We were looking for the maximum use for our funds, right?
Is
Right,
there,
so with the bank, so we would be working with the trust department to look at
Right.
investment vehicles that are not necessarily Bank of Guam TCDs, but jumbos with other banks.
Right. That's my question, you can go outside. No, you're not bound to the bank.
I believe the law says that we have to since bank.
Where we put our money?
there a requirement that they be U.S.-backed security instruments?
So I was trying to determine that from the law to see what the restrictions are. And I didn't see
Okay.
anything that required U.S. Bank. But, we want to make sure that we're keeping our money secure.
Yeah, yeah.
In
You want-
vehicles that we're not.
Okay. No, no.
You could earn a lot more than 4% though.
If you get
But you
it,
could lose a lot more than 4%.
you could lose everything.
Like this.
Okay,
Exactly.
okay.
Can we draw it at a Rude Awakenings?
Any other questions on this? No?
Nope.
Go to the next one, Miguel.
Next resolution is the last one, 15 FY 2023, and this is seeking approval to increase our budget and provide an extension to the program management and construction management contract for the OEA grant-funded projects. And this is essentially just to close us out, right?
Yeah.
And so Brown and Caldwell is our PMCM, and we're seeking to increase their authorized contract amount by $300,000 to cover the last amendment to this to just wrap up the project. This will bring the total, the reason for the delays on the project and getting everything closed out, but we are extremely close. And with the increase that we're seeking, it will bring their total contract amount to about 16.9 million over the I don't know, I guess it's been 6 years of this program of capital improvements. The services will run through January 31st of 2023, and it will be on a time and materials basis, so the $300,000 amount is a not-to-exceed amount. The closeout requirements, all the administrative work, which will be some of Brown and Caldwell's efforts, but largely our grants department's efforts in filing all the final reporting and everything, that is going to be finished by March 31st. And of course, the funding source for this, we're seeking applicable bond funds or system development charges, or a combination thereof. We're still working out the exact amounts from
Questions?
everything's operational. We're all done.
I'm
I
sure
got
we
word
may
this
come up
morning.
with questions by Tuesday.
Yeah, okay. I just got word this morning, I don't know if you remember Dan Glasson, the tall guy who originally helped us start this program. He left, right, and so, but he's returned to OEA, and apparently he's going to be here in April. So we're hoping to arrange a tour with him and
Oh, the facilities he helped us with.
for facilities.
Very
help
good.
us build. Yes.
Gary's still on? Okay, wow.
I believe he might
That's what they
be.
say about me.
Okay, that's it for the resolutions, Miguel? That's it for the resolutions?
That's it for the resolution.
Okay, reports?
So we can move into the management report.
Sure.
Up first for the operations update for water production, we had for the month of January 38.5 million gallons a day average production with 91 active wells and 18 grounded. This production is pretty consistent, just on par with what we produced in December of last year. For Tumon Maui, production was stable at around 1 million gallons a day. We did have a few days where we dropped off in production because of power issues. And then on the distribution side, all of our water booster pump stations maintain an operability of 94.8% on all pumps. That's a little bit down from prior months, so we're working on that. 100% in operability in central, and then 92% and 94% respectively for northern and southern water booster pump stations. On distribution tank levels, I'm sorry, there's an error on the chart. The percentages on your left should be cut in half, I think, but we'll get that squared away for the final report. But we did see a little bit of a dip in our southern reservoir capacity first week of January, and we built that back up, so we finished the month at right where we should be, between 40 and 50%. in terms of our tank levels. On the wastewater collection side for the month of January, operability maintained steady at 88.5% across all 80 or so pump stations, 91% operability in the southern pump stations, 88.5% northern, and 85.5% roughly in central wastewater collection stations. On our cleaning and CCTV, in January, we exceeded our target just by about a quarter of a mile, so we're up at 5.5 for the month. This will continue for the rest of the year so we can meet our targets. On wastewater treatment in January, we disposed of about 600,000 pounds of sludge at a cost of about $55,000. You can see flows were up slightly in January, owing mostly to the heavy rains that we got toward the middle and end of the month. That is most noticeable in Agate Santa Rita and in Pneumatic, the increases, and also a little bit in the Agana plant. Northern District flows seem to remain steady even with the heavy rains. For asset management, our PM to CM ratio was 74% preventive maintenance and 26% corrective maintenance through January of 2023. Completion of all those work orders for preventive maintenance, 81% of the work orders were completed, and for corrective maintenance, 90% of the work orders were completed. For leak repair versus equipment repair, for corrective maintenance, leak repair was 54% and equipment was 46%. And out of those two categories, we had 96% completion on leak work orders and 90% completion on equipment work orders. Moving on to our One Guam update, we completed the 2 Mon Maui well inspections by the Navy on January of 23rd with no issues. On the OEA projects, as I reported last month, by the time we met in January, we had completed all the NGLA deep observation wells, so we are in the process of closing out that project. I believe we've received all final invoices and we're in the process of getting those paid. Other issues with One Guam, there are still a couple of property issues that we're working through. We are following up on the extension request for the MOA for Seti Bay, and this is property that GWA owns that the Navy is using for reforestation or mitigation projects. And the maintenance for that, which is going to go on for several years. On the up near the Andes South Marble property, we're working on trying to get an easement map because the sewer lines, gravity lines ran into DOD property. I think we've gotten that approval, and so the map is being finalized. Now we're engaged in discussions with the Air Force about connections to that sewer line from their facilities in Andes South. We are still waiting on approval to connect a redundant water line for the Northern District wastewater treatment plant. The Navy's following up on that. And then we are also trying to work through some issues on trying to get the Navy to provide or send wastewater our way from some of their housing developments along Route 5. There is a DPW project that's ongoing in that area. We're trying to get some of that infrastructure put in so they can make a connection at a future date. But there is a little bit of crowding in the shoulder where we're proposing to make that connection, and we're trying to work through those conflicts. It may work out that we have to do it at a later time. We're trying to get it done before the repaving, but it may work out that we won't be able to do that, but we're still trying. And then finally, we have been sharing our data for PFAS with the Navy, and they are also doing some projects right now with regard to PFAS and potential treatment systems. So we're providing them data so we can share both on
what our analytical data is and also on what their mitigation or treatment options that they're looking at, what results come about from any studies that they would be doing. We're interested in getting that information to help guide our efforts in dealing with this issue as we move forward.
And then finally, we're looking at the 2016 MOU just to see if it needs to be updated. So that conversation is happening, and if there is an update, of course, we'll brief the CCU on what changes might be made. No change to the court order status. We are still 98% complete. Final completion will not be done until we finish all of the reservoir projects. We did have several SSO events in January, mostly centered in the central areas, Tumuning and Tumon, and then a couple down south.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Miguel, just a quick question. So, you know, we're almost done with, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding, we're almost done with Court Order 2011. We're finishing basically the storage tanks, just as you described. And then have we already signed the new consent decree, and how does that overlap between the old court order / consent decree and the new one that you shared with us? Did we already execute that with US EPA, or what's the updated status on that?
No, we have not executed it. We are still negotiating the final consent decree. We just received language, the full text of the consent decree that's being proposed, and we have been meeting internally and with our environmental counsel to provide feedback. We're scheduled to meet with US EPA and Department of Justice later this week.
And is the thinking that as we complete 2011, new one slides in, and it's, I mean, they sort of piggyback each other. I mean, that's trying to figure out. That's my understanding of it, right? We finish one, but we're always going to have enough. We have yet another one to work on.
So we will be working under two different documents with
Okay.
two separate requirements simultaneously for the period that it takes us to complete the court order. But once we're done with the tanks, we are
Then
going
2011 goes away.
2011 should go away, but
Right.
has to go through the approval of the court first. So
Okay.
we will have to present that we've completed all the compliance requirements. Department of Justice and US EPA will have to agree and provide that information to the court, and then the judge.
And that, you know, that happens over the next year or two, I guess, or it depends when the projects are done for
Right.
2011. Meanwhile, we will then execute. Do we wait to execute
don't
the second
wait.
one? So
We-
that
we don't
it'll be
wait.
sort of a simultaneous. We'll
Yes.
have two consent decrees that we're working on, finishing the original one basically, amended in 2011, beginning the new one. That's the 2023 consent.
Right.
Way to think about it.
Any other questions? No?
Moving on, nothing really to report on our land acquisition issues. We're still waiting for movement either from the federal government or the SHPO or DLM on several properties, including the PD and the Stumbo tanks, one of the well sites, AG12, and then one of the booster pump stations and Aspen Springs. The board's aware of our delays there, and we're
None of these are court order, right? Or some of them are?
So the tank projects are
Stable?
court ordered.
Okay.
The PD one, we've kept EPA apprised of
Okay.
the issues there relating to property ownership. So there will be an impact on the court order from at least one of these sites. Okay, and then the last couple slides on leaks. We are still maintaining less than 20 open work orders at the end of every day, so the pressure line unit continues to perform admirably and keep us on track with that. Chris, you want to go through the...
Miguel. So the next slide you see is just some highlights from the customer care division from January. For all three customer service centers, we saw a total of 2,168 person visitors. Upper Tumon remains to be the location that had most, and Ian was behind them. Ulali saw a lower than normal average number of visitors last month. Part of that was due to the one day had to close down because of the main break, Green Drive. Average wait times for the month in each of the customer lobbies, we have 4 minutes at Hulali, 6 minutes at Vidian, minutes at Upper Fremont. Average number of active pay plans remains the same relative to the average for the year. Same with email responses. We're responding to about almost 600 emails a month from customers. We did field 7,032 customer calls in January, which was a little bit higher than normal. The yearly average is sitting right now at about 600. Field activities were roughly the same. We executed about 897 field activities. And then lastly, the customer service representatives and supervisors, they all attended a customer care series presentation on the newly created CCU approved customer care representative series. And this has to do with the implementation of that new series where we implemented level 1, 2, 3. And they also completed a skills assessment testing that was done in the end of January. And so the skills assessment is going to be used to kind of map out training for all of the different customer care representatives prior to doing recruitments for the level 2 and 3 positions. And then lastly, this month, all of them will be migrated from their current positions to a customer care representative 1 position. So there'll be no change in pay, no change in responsibilities. They'll all just settle in at the customer care representative 1 position until we approve for the higher level.
Okay.
For accounts receivable, residential customers, there was a little bit of an increase, about 44,000. That number for greater than 60 days is sitting right at about $1 million, which is pretty much the pre-COVID average, as you can see there on the chart. And that was an additional 99 accounts from the previous month. Slide is the commercial division. Last month, it was really low, lowest it's ever been. We had an increase of about $8,000 greater than 60 days. Right now, it's sitting at I believe it's 10,000 roughly. So there was additional 4 accounts for them.
The first slide is a snapshot of our financial indicators. For the last 3 months, our debt service coverage is at 1.3. Our collection ratio for the year ticked up 1% to 95%. And our days billed last month were 32 days, which probably influenced the increase in water demand to 160K. Our accounts receivable days went down by 1 to 37, and our accounts payable days ticked up to 45. And that was due to later payment of the GPA account, which, because it's so large, influenced the calculation. Our FTE, we ended the month with our FTE level at 360. Going to the next slide, this is a picture of our revenues and expenses and net operating income for the last 12 months. I think, as was pointed out last month, we did see a loss, but this month we're back up to 310,000. This is a picture of our water and revenue and demand by rate class. Our residential demand and revenues compared to last year continue to be below FY22, and our commercial Gwa Ws and hotel continue to rise, not quite more than the residential level. The next slide is our wastewater revenue and flow. And as our commercial accounts improve, we see additional increases in our. And then the next slide is just a picture of what our demand is. I think next month I'll increase it to 5 years because this is the little bit. So I wanted to, I'll add the couple more years so we can see it compared. The next slide shows our expenses by categories, by object class. So we saw increases in power, net salaries and benefits, and depreciation contraction. So as much as we can, we're trying to control those expenditures that we can. Admin in general, we're actually below last year. And then this is just a picture comparing revenues and demand. And then the next picture shows it against our revenues and collections. And then this is a different picture from what, similar to what Chris was mentioning, but a little different. Slide on the left is all accounts, and then the slide on the right is just, and the last pages are.
Colleen, just a quick question. Can you refresh my aging memory? How do we put money into the rate stabilization fund? You know, just looking at your cash balances on the balance sheet, and I'm just trying to remember.
So we set up the rate stabilization fund initially when we changed the way that we were calculating our debt service coverage. We had that reserve account, so we took the money from the reserve account and we put it in the rate stabilization. So the hope is that if we get to a point this year where we're able to make sufficient revenues, that we could move those revenues to.
Is there a ratio you shoot for, or you,
Well,
Miguel,
we're-
just say,
yeah,
we
we're
got
looking at our debt
$500,000,
ser-
we can throw
yeah,
it in there?
Basically, it's our debt service ratio, because if we move money into the rate stabilization fund, we could not count those revenues towards our debt service calculation.
Yeah. So you want to keep, I mean, we've been hanging at 1.3 for a while, which is,
Right.
okay. And yeah, so that's what kind of influences how much you move in if there's actually net revenue, right?
Right.
We're still kind of in recovery mode with revenues, and then spending is always something we have to watch. Yeah.
So, we did get a 5% increase. We are seeing, continued increases in our hotel, commercial,
They come
and
back.
Guam accounts, but we are also seeing decreases in our demand.
Thank you.
What, Commissioner Santos?
Looking at my friends at GDOE, when's the last time we paid this?
I think part of the issue with GDOE is that they had the opportunity to use federal funds last year to pay their accounts. I'm not sure.
Make a call.
Yeah.
They have a new controller, so I'll give her.
Make a call.
Okay.
We get paid.
Colleen, real quick, so the projected revenue for this year includes the 5% increase, right? 5.5% increase? How does that compare to the revenue for 22? What do you think, what's the bump up you intend to see? And you can tell us on Tuesday, okay?
Up a couple million year to date.
Well, for the first quarter, right?
230, when you get a chance to look at slide page. Yeah,
Okay.
36 million first 4 months versus 34 million. I'm assuming 5% of 34 is about $1 million. Here's your $2 million, more or less.
Okay. So if you follow that through, then you've got about 8 million increase in revenue from the 5% increase, 5.5. I mean, if you're consistent,
We still have.
you're the $2 million.
Yeah, you're 2 million up 4 months.
Yeah.
So
2 million
six,
to,
yeah. It says through January, so
Oh, through January. I thought it was just for the first quarter.
times 2, 6 million.
Okay.
We'll refresh your memory and provide you with the projections that we did
Yeah.
at the time that the
Sure.
PUC approved the.
Okay.
And then next October 1,
We got
something
another,
happens, or we get to arm wrestle again?
We need to true up.
On June 1st, we're supposed to go back. Won't have the ARPA money.
When we
get
did the
additional, there was that new infrastructure bill that was passed. CWA getting any extra money out of that?
Yes. An extra 26 million per year for the next 5 years
No, nice.
for
For
grant
projects.
funds.
Nice.
So the overall effect, if you recall, our 5-year CIP, we averaged around a $60 million a year spend rate. So all this means is if we get an additional 26, we would have to fund less from either bonds or revenues. We don't have revenues sufficient to fund CIPs at the moment. So it would be, bond funding.
we have to go out for bonds.
So there will be some savings over the next 5 years with respect to what we would have to borrow.
And would expect rate need for some discussion about rates over the next,
Yeah,
life changes, right?
we will have a new 5-year rate plan that we're working on right now.
And that's coupled with, you're coming up with a number that you need to go out to the bond market for during the 5-year period.
We already have that number.
have that
It's
number?
in the draft legislation.
Oh, yeah, where are we with that?
We are still kind of waiting
Waiting for a
for things to
sponsor, or-
settle. Well, we have, we have one senator who's expressed a willingness to sponsor it. We want to meet with him to update him. Conditions have changed somewhat with respect to the tax exempt commercial paper. I don't think it's necessarily an attractive tool for us at the moment, but we still want to have it in the toolbox as the market returns to normal, right? So we are still planning on pushing forward with the draft legislation on that.
So we did consent decree 1. We're fortunate enough to get a guesstimate total bond borrowing. Decree 1. We were able to go to the legislature for a one-time authorization for that total amount. Part of the argument was the deadlines that are in there, we don't want to be running back every fiscal year saying, okay, we got another 100 million next year, give us permission, right? So tactically, we approached back then, which was bigger bet. Tough nut to crack sometimes. Are we thinking about look at your 5-year borrowing is going to be 300 million, 500 million, authorize us for that because it's in the consent. The thing that was compelling for the legislature was, this is the consent decree. Either you give us the authority to borrow this money or Francis Tidenko Gatewood will take care of the authority, right? And we don't need to do it that way. We're successful working collaboratively. This is the number. This is the list, the new consent decree 2. And can we work with you senators to authorize us one time so we can meet the deadlines and not have to run back?
Well, the timing is tricky here. We're not at that point yet with the consent decree. We have an idea, but we don't have
The actual consent.
The
When do
actual-
you think the consent decree will be done? Summertime?
Well, they wanted to get it done before the beginning of the new fiscal year. Obviously, we're still working on it, right?
I'm
So
on your side, but eventually there's a number. I trust you to say you want it done by X. Right? When did you want it done? Summer-ish?
we would hope that we would have it done by then. But definitely, we should know within the next couple of months whether, that's going to be.
You need bond authorization before summer? More confident with this looks like?
So the other factor here is that we're working on updating the master plan. So not just the consent decree projects, but other projects that will arise from changes from when the last master plan was done need to be included. So that work is ongoing. We hope that that'll be done March, April timeframe, and at that point, if we get more firm on what we know will be in the consent decree, then all of those things will come together and we'll get an updated estimate on CIP. At that point, we'd be able to change the number that we currently have in the draft legislation for funding authorization. Right now, we don't, and it's based on our best estimates of what we would be required to do, but the number could change based on what comes out of the master plan.
And your
update.
preference is to kind of wait, gather, finish this review, your side saying, okay, I'm confident these are the numbers, DCU,
Yeah.
PUC legislature.
I would like
and
to
then
take-
we'll figure out tactically how to approach the legislature.
I would like to take the non-Georgetown approach.
Okay.
But I just want to limit, make it easier for you to execute, not having to run to the legislature every year. And it worked before. It seems like all the pieces are in place to make an intelligent approach to the legislature. I'm cool with your timeline. I mean, it's your timeline. I just wanted to get a feel for when you don't need to see the legislature in the next 120 days for a small bond borrow.
No.
If it worked,
No.
you like this idea of perhaps taking them a big picture. Let's see them one time and say, give us, I mean, even if you know it's $500 million in 7 years, just say, okay, just give us the first 250 for the next 3 years. We just don't want to have to run in and, mother may I I mean, this is the list. Either you do it or Francis is going to make us do it, and then that's just stupid.
Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anything else? That's it? If you come up with any questions, we'll ask you Tuesday night.
Yes, sir.
Okay. 5-minute, 10-minute recess? Yeah. Motion to adjourn?
We'll adjourn the work session.
Second? Second? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thanks, Miguel. Good job.